The meeting open. I think we're all here except Luke, who has extended his apologies for tonight. He's had to go to Melbourne. So item 2 are the rates and charges, and the recommendation is that we set the rates and charges in accordance with recommendation A 1 to 10. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you. Alderman Chong. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Alderman Ewington. Alderman Chong, do you wish to speak to it?
Move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Alderman Ewington.
No.
Other speakers? Alderman James?
Yes. Would have been nice to hear from the mover and seconder, but anyway. Mr. Mayor, is probably the first time I've seen such a lengthy document that covers, and I wrote a comment here as if it's like a roadmap, because if you want to actually read it verbatim, then I think the interpretation of it to the layman or the person in the street would be, well, they'd have to seek external advice as to understand what it's really about. In previous years, and I stand corrected on this, and that is we haven't gone into chapters 1 to 10 on over 5 pages, when we're really looking at a rate increase, including the high levy of 3.3, and also
I will stand correct you there, Alderman James. Rates motions in the past have been extensive, very extensive, and indeed several years ago include the policy as well. So this is a normal sort of length for a rates motion.
Well, I beg to differ. I believe that it's gone into a lot of detail, which is as far as the interpretation. That's my view, and
okay,
so it's as is. Look, I will not be supporting this rate increase, and as I've said previously at the workshop, and I've attended every workshop in relation to the rates discussion, and that by the very nature of trying to understand where we're heading in relation to this. The fact of the matter is, there won't be 100 words from me as part of the Council's news that's coming out very shortly. And one of the reasons that I will not support this, and that is that I did in my brochure last year mention about a rate increase in accordance with the 2.5% of the Hobart Index. This is over and beyond that. And also the fact of the matter of the Council's 2.5 enterprise bargaining agreement, as far as the wage and salaries are concerned, is in about the 2.5, although it's subject to incrementals that occur from time to time. So given that our EBA is pretty much on line ball with the 2.5, and given that there is a CPI Hobart Index of 2.5, I think that would have been appropriate for us to at least peg it back to the CPI, and I would have been one of the first to move the motion if it had been at that level. It's not. It's 2.91, and that is by the very nature of an increase over and above the Hobart CPI index. And as I mentioned in my leaflet last year at the Council, I was supportive of a 2.5 CPI adjustment. It's also interesting to note that and again, if you want to look at other councils in the Hobart metropolitan area, the Brighton Council came in at 2.1, and Hobart did make a change to it, even though theirs is substantially higher than Clarence. But there was some discussion and compromise reached as far as what Hobart or the elected representatives were quite conscious about, and had the initial recommendation, I think, that it was put up for consideration, adjusted by 0.3 of 1%. So look, nothing's changed. My comments that I was making in relation to the 100 words that were coming out in the next news item was basically in support of the council trying to keep within the CPI index. That has met with some concern or changes that were required, and at the last minute I was approached to make some changes or adjustments to that. But having said that, I'm basically sticking to what I've proposed in my brochure last year. Nothing's changed since October last year, and I will not be supporting this rates and charges because I believe it could be better spelled out to the community, and that is at the 2.5 as per the CPI index.
Thanks, Alderman James. Look, I do have to correct another thing there, or clarification. You talked about the 100 words. This council has set a policy for that 100 words, which requires aldermen to reflect council policy in the 100 words they use. And when the estimates were set, it was quite clear that we were accepting a rate rise, excluding the fire levy, of 2.9%. And what you were putting out was entirely inconsistent with that, and therefore had no option but to exclude that from the 100 words, and then you elected not to have any 100 words at all.
Because of the last minute call.
Well, that's a point of clarification. Are there any other speakers? Alderman Mulder.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got an observation, and we can talk about percentages till the cows come home, but it doesn't mean anything unless we've got a comparable, we compare ourselves to others in terms of what the base is that 2% is coming up with. I remember one of the 5-year plans when everyone was into central planning, where staggering thousands and thousands of percentage increases were reported because someone had managed to harvest 2 paddocks of wheat instead of the we've virtually none before. So it really comes down to the percentages. And I know looking at Kingston, and I'm wondering why places like Kingston can just have a set stormwater rate of $71 per property, while we in Clarence have to do it at 0.38 cents in the dollar. So our rates in the dollar, if you have a look at them, become quite comparable with Kingston if you add stormwater and the general rate together, even though it looks quite good for Clarence when we say we're just under 0.2%, under 0.2 of a cents in the dollar of capital value, whereas Kingston is 0.238. But then you add the 0.38 cents in the dollar for our stormwater rate, and suddenly we are comparable with Kingston at that particular level. So I just make the observation that I really do think that the local government division should be putting out reports, as it did in 2017, which actually compares the total rate take across the councils, rather than each council having a slightly different method to get out. So it comes down to the rate that I use is, if you have a look at a average of a house around $400,000, what does the rate, if they had that house in Kingston compared to had that house in Glenorchy compared to had that house in Clarence, I think those would be genuine rates. But I think that across the board, this rate seems to compare favourably with, can compare equally with Kingston.
Other speakers? Alderman Walker?
Look, shock horror, this isn't perfect and it doesn't satisfy me in every way, and it's not exactly the budget that I as Emperor would have put down. I don't think it's the one or the rates policy that any of us individually would. This is how we've come together, and the end result I think is fair and reasonable. I think there's all things that we think perhaps should have been in the last budgeting process or taken out of it, but this is where we are. I think that Council did make the right decision in around the 2012-13 mark, deciding to go to capital value instead of AAV. I think that's a nebulous and stupid measure. Rent seekers will always try and push towards land value, because then you can rate a 20-storey shopping centre the same as a used caravan yard if it's the same meterage. This is a decent and sound policy. It's also wise that there is the universal or the general charge as part of our rating mechanism. That's a fairer way to take some of the high end distortions out of capital value. Whilst it possibly, I would have argued, and I did in the get go, that perhaps it should have been set at a higher rate. We've landed at a reasonable policy around there, and I support it. As far as getting upset about, as another alderman alluded to in their speech, just getting a year-on-year, snapshot about a rate increase. It does matter what the base is from, but as I listen, if people are going to say, well, I can't support it because it's too high, then I'll be disappointed if through each and every council meeting for the next 12 months, when it's alderman's question times, it's like, can we have a bit more service out there, or we need to do this here. You can't. The old school Democrats from the US, if you like, the tax and spends, but somehow it seems like the don't tax but keep spending anyway model seems to be the new way of democratic thinking. I do support this policy. As I said, it's not everything that I think I would want individually, but I think we arrived at a reasonable place.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, like the previous speaker, I too stand to support this motion tonight and the approach or the policy before us. I'd like, Mr Mayor, to first acknowledge the comprehensive process that we've gone through here. We have before us tonight, as Alderman James himself mentioned, a comprehensive and a thorough report. This is absolutely fantastic. It's a culmination of many months of work, not only from us elected members, and I think it's fair to say that all of us contributed very constructively to the budget process, but also to our CFO and her staff, who have done an absolutely outstanding job to arrive at a 2.9% rate increase. If you talk year on year, Glenorchy City Council had a 2.5% rate increase this year. But let's not forget that last year, 18-19 financial year, a 12.5% increase. So the points made earlier here tonight are very sound. Hobart, down from a 3.5% increase to 3.25%, and Kingborough, of course, down from 5.5% following community consultation to 3.95%. Sure, the comprehensive process from my perspective, and the point made a moment ago about the increasing demands on this organisation by our residents, who are demanding and frankly are deserving of an increase or a level of service that we want to provide. It of course costs money. We have to cut our cloth according to what's available. We have to tighten our belts and make savings wherever possible. I certainly think that from a staffing perspective, and of course that's not, we have one job here, and that is to appoint the General Manager, but I am continually amazed and impressed by the work that our staff do with what I see very limited resources. And I think that a 2.9% rate increase, sure, it's not perfect, but it's gone through, as I said, a comprehensive process. We've all been part of that process. The staff and our CFO have been outstanding throughout the whole process, and I therefore think, Mr Mayor, it would sort of not be appropriate to endorse and support this motion for us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, as long as I've been on council, it's not an issue of we're going to have a cheap rate increase, we're going to have a large rate increase. What it is all the aldermen I've worked with over the years, and we've done budgets, and like Alderman Bromley, I think the staff have done a fantastic job. But in the end, what you need is not a high or low, you need a responsible budget. And to me, a rate increase of this size is, I believe, very responsible, because Alderman Bromley is right. We kept asking for more and more. Everybody wants more and more and more. And you're quite right that someone said that people in question time keep saying we should have more money here, more money there. Well, where's it come from? And look, I think we've all worked pretty diligently. I mean, I've attended every workshop we've had on the budget. I think virtually every alderman here has. And we all agree this is a very, very responsible set of figures we're doing. Now, someone raised Brighton, and I remember on my favourite channel, the ABC, someone said about Brighton, they said, and this was a Brighton resident, said, our rates are low, but what do we get for it? We get nothing besides the essential services. So, you know, I think we're going ahead in leaps and bounds in Clarence, and I think this is a very, very responsible budget to go further ahead on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are three comments I should like to just make in summing up, I guess. Firstly, as several aldermen have said, the budget and the rates increase is inevitably a compromise. If you think about all the work that the staff do and that we do throughout all the workshops to get to the final numbers, there is always a compromise. Some of us would like to see some more things in there, some of us would like to see some taken out. We get to what we can all live with at the end of the day. A couple of other things that were mentioned, the budget motion, which certainly when I read it, and I confess I didn't go back and look at last year's, but it does look essentially the same layout as we have been used to with the budget motion. And I, for one, am very grateful for that, because I think it sets out in a lot of detail what we're doing and makes it easy to see how it applies to all the different categories that we have throughout the rating process. And the final comment, I guess, is about the comparison to CPI. It's very easy to say this increase is more than CPI or less than CPI. The problem with comparing it to the CPI that the headline one that you see in the newspapers is that's a basket of goods that makes no sense at all for a council. We don't go shopping and buy biscuits and fruit and all of those kind of things that they're including in the CPI. It's pointless. We have to look at the council cost index, which from my recollection from the workshops is closer to 3.3%, making the 2.9 that we ended up with actually very responsible. I seek council support.
Thank you. So the motion is that we adopt the fees, schedules and charges and set the rates for 2019-2020 as per the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. And that concludes our business. I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you.